to quickly make some comments about the whole experience. So I talked about white privilege in the introduction, and I did feel very much the effect of white privilege and also the effect of it being taken away. I mean, the makeup of the AME church was mostly African American. The makeup of the mosque was mostly other. It wasn't any one particular ethnic group, but it was just not white. And then the Spanish Mass, was almost entirely non-white. So I felt the privilege being taken away, which I feel was a really good thing. And the other two articles that I really thought about were Aronson's The Threat of Stereotype and Banks's Multicultural Education's 5 Dimensions, particularly equity pedagogy. And the Aronson I found very applicable because the first thing I did when I went to the mosque was stereotype. I had in my head what it was going to be like, and I had in my head what Sister Allie was going to be like as a Muslim woman. And yeah, she showed up in hijab, fully covered from head to toe, but she was white. She wasn't of Middle Eastern extraction, and I was expecting a Middle Eastern woman. I mean, she was fairer than I am. We actually joked about how hijab was great for her because she didn't have to wear sunscreen. So there was an instance in which I was stereotyping someone else. And I know that I was stereotyped at the cathedral because the girls on either side of me figured out pretty quickly, just by looking at me, not even paying attention to what I was doing, that I didn't speak Spanish. And they were right. So there were 2 instances of stereotyping that I experienced as the person doing the stereotyping and as the person stereotyped, where one was incorrect, my act of stereotyping was incorrect, but when I was stereotyped, it was correct. So there is that constant threat, and you do have to continue to tell yourself that you maybe need to step back and stop trying to project your cultural lens onto somebody else. There was also equity pedagogy, and I thought about that the most in the cathedral, where I felt so out of place. I was sitting there, completely distracted, looking at the stained glass windows, not paying any attention to what was going on, what was being said, because I didn't understand it, having the realization that that's what it's like to be a limited English proficient student. And knowing that what Banks was talking about in equity pedagogy goes beyond talking about, like, putting Hispanic history into your social studies or putting women's history into your social studies. It has a lot to do with understanding how cultural groups work. And, of course, the thing that impressed me most in the cathedral was the sheer level of noise. It was noisy the whole time I was there. And it was okay that there was that level of noise because they were all there as large family units. And I guess it might have been a time where, this was the only time during the week that you maybe saw that aunt or that uncle or that niece or that nephew or that grandmother. And so they took that time in the church to make those connections with each other. And it was very cooperative. There was a whole lot of cooperation in terms of people handing babies over pews so it could go sit with somebody else for a little while. This sense that I couldn't tell, there was the girl next to me kept talking to the little boy standing at the end of the pew with his father. And as far as I could tell, she wasn't his mom, she wasn't his sister, but she clearly knew him, and she kept offering to take the child until finally the father was like, yeah, I can't do it anymore, and handed the little boy a cross. So there was even this communal sense of taking care of each other, especially the children. And understanding that gives me a lens through which to look at some of my diverse students and realize that, maybe they don't do so well in individual work. Maybe they do need to be in a cooperative group where they can each have input but work together towards a project. So that was very enlightening. And the project overall was exceptionally enlightening, I think. It gave me a way to look at my weaknesses, which was my tendency to stereotype, my tendency to go in with an expectation. I love having my expectations destroyed. So I guess that's positive, but I do need to work on going in with expectations at all, as I did to the mosque. And actually, I went in with expectations of the cathedral that it wasn't going to be much different, and it was very different. So those are some weaknesses that I can work on, and also being able to find ways to work with diverse students. So basically what I hope to do is continue to put myself in these situations so that I can gain more knowledge and understanding. I mean, it's fascinating. It was an incredibly enjoyable experience. Thank you, Dr. Jekyll, for making us do that. Because I really got a lot of insight into what it's going to be like to be standing up in front of a room of kids that aren't like me. I mean, I'm becoming a teacher because I had a positive school experience. And a lot of these kids might not have the same experience because the people standing in front of them don't necessarily understand where they're coming from. And I'm not ever going to know what it's like, absolutely 100%, to be them. But I can make myself available to figure out the major aspects of their culture that impact how they behave in a classroom, how they work in a classroom, and how they learn the kinds of things that are important to their families, the kind of things that are important to them that might be different from what was important to me as a student. So it was a very valuable experience, and I hope to go on to have many more just like these, and learn more and more and more about the kinds of cultures that are out there in our incredibly diverse student population.